Preppin Data Week 13 was brought to you from the mind of Tom Prowse, and it's about a support desk, so tickets that are being submitted, and the SLAs that are in place with different departments as to how long it should take for those tickets to be responded to. So we've got a couple of different input files and some different outputs that we're required to do. So we've got 3 different outputs to answer some questions about, the current status of tickets, like how many are meeting their SLAs, that sort of thing. So if we go into Tableau Prep, then some interesting things to think about when bringing in the data. So we've got 4 tabs in our Excel sheet. We've got the SLA agreements, which are pretty self-explanatory. They come in quite cleanly with the department and the SLA agreement. And then we've got a few different months worth of data. So usually you'd kind of think if you're bringing in a few different months, you're probably going to want to union them together somehow. But initially I was thinking, well, what's the common way that these are all described? But a more clever way to think about it is, what makes them different to this other tab? So usually when you're doing a wildcard union, you might be matching a pattern and you're including those sheets. But by switching it to exclude, then you can exclude just the SLA one. So that's how we're unioning it only together the necessary month by month tickets. So that was the first thing that I had to get my head around with this challenge. And then we don't really need the file paths because that's just going to be kind of the same information, and we don't need the table names because that just contains the month, which is already included in our timestamp. So both those fields are unnecessary to take through to the rest of the challenge. So then we're going to do some cleaning to this data set. So we have this ticket field. If I go back to here for a second, this ticket field has a slash in between the ID, the department, and then the person who was picking up the ticket. But we don't really care about the person who picks up the ticket for any other section of this challenge. So when we're doing a split, then we're going to do a custom split on the slash and only have the first 2 fields that it returns. And then we're just renaming those to be the ticket ID and the department and getting rid of that initial ticket field because it's no longer useful for us. So that's kind of the first step of cleaning our data up. Then we're joining together to bring in those SLA agreements on the department. So we're not increasing the number of rows at all. We've still got the same number of rows. So that join is working as we would hope it would. Next up, we're going to be thinking about this condition here where we've got that employees can work at the weekends, but we don't really want to count those. We only want to know business days. So we're rolling back anything that happens at the weekend to midnight on Saturday. So that's a bit confusing to get your head around initially. But basically what we're going to need is we're going to need to know what day of the week it is. So we'll use the date name function to know what day of the week it is, basically, from the timestamp field. And then we'll be writing a calculation that says that, hey, if the day of the week is Sunday, then we're going to want to minus a day from it, so make it Saturday. And then we're going to want to make it midnight at that day. And cleverly enough, if you do just a date around a field that is a date time, then it just rolls it back to midnight of that day. So our Sunday becomes Saturday at midnight, and anything else is just going to become midnight anyway. So that's how it's going to be counted, and that is meeting that condition that has been stated in the challenge. And then we no longer have any need for this weekday field, so we can get rid of that again. So now we're just kind of looking into what the current status is. So we need quite a lot of information, and LODs are going to come into play here. So first of all, we want to know what's the earliest date for each ticket ID. And to do that, we'd be creating a fixed LOD. And we'd be saying for each ticket ID, we want the minimum timestamp. And that will become our created at date. When was that ticket created? So that's what's happening up here. If you can see those fixed LEDs are exactly the same. In a similar way, we can change this to max to be what's kind of the current status of that ticket. And that would be matching this one here, which we're calling the last update. And then finally, the other thing that we need to know, rather than having the timestamp here, we also want to know what the max status is, so the current status. And so we're doing the status number there and seeing that for each ticket, you know, what number is the maximum status number, and then that number relates to a status name, so we can sort of get more information out of that. So I'm just going to delete that because that was just me showing how all of these 3 calculated fields were created. And then we're going to have a filter so that we only have, rather at this point we have like the 3,000 rows, we only want our current status. We don't care about anything that's happened before with that ticket, because we've got sort of the date it was created and the current date that it's on, or the day that it had its last update. So we don't need any more information other than that to go forward with this challenge. So we're just going to say that the current status number is equal to the status number. We only want the most recent thing with that ticket ID. And then we can see that all of our ticket IDs only have 1 row associated with them now. And that's putting us in a good state to be able to continue with the challenge. So for our first output, we want to know how many cases are in each status, and that's quite a simple aggregation. So here's our first output. We're just aggregating on that status name, grouping on that, and we're just going to use the number of rows, which is usually down here at the bottom as our sum, and that matches the output of the challenge. So that's great. Our next output that we need to create is how many closed tickets have missed their SLA and how many are on track to meet their SLA. So that's a little bit more complicated. So we kind of need to work out how many days this ticket has been open first. So the first thing that we're doing here is we're working out when the ticket was created, what week it was created on, sorry. And then, so we want to know the week of this created and the week of when it was last updated, so that we can work out how many weekends have passed. Like if something is in a different week from created to the last update, then that means a weekend will have passed. So we know that we'll need to do something with the numbers there. So let's just see what I mean there. So we're doing for the week created, from this created field, we just want to know the week number basically. And we're saying the week starts on a Monday because that's generally how we would count these things. We're doing a similar thing for the last update, the week of that. And then we want to know how many weekends have passed. So we're just minusing 1 from the other. And that becomes relevant now in our days open calculation, because we're doing a date difference of the day between when it was created and when the last update was. But then we're minusing off however many weekends have passed times by 2, because there are 2 days in a weekend. So that just helps us to get rid of any of those weekend days that we don't want to count. So that's great. That's a good foundation step for the next 2 outputs. So we want to know for all the closed ones, which ones have gone over their SLAs. So we are just coming along to the status name here, and we're selecting closed and saying if we select that, then we will keep only. And we're then also only interested in ones that have gone over their SLA agreement. So we're just doing a filter for if the days open is greater than the SLA agreement. And then we're just aggregating that, so the number of rows of our status name, which is closed. And then to match the output, we're just going to rename our status name to closed over SLA and rename this number of rows to be count. And similarly for the ones that are open, then instead of keeping that closed status, we're excluding it. And now we're interested in the days open being less than or equal to the SLA agreement. And we're doing a similar thing where we're aggregating those number of rows, and we're just adding a calculated field here that says open under SLA, so that we have the desired output when we're unioning them together. Cool. So for our third and final output, then we're looking into percentages of the SLA being met, and then we're going to rank those. So this is by department as well. So what we first of all want to do, we're only interested in closed cases, as it mentioned. So we're going to do what we did on the first of those steps up here, which is keep only the closed tickets. And we're using this calculator field of if the SLA is met or not, and we're having that as a 1 or a 0. So that when we do an aggregation step, we can just sum up those ones, because each ticket will either have a 1 or a 0, and if the SLA agreement has been met, then that will just sum into all the different tickets that have met their SLA. And we're grouping it by department, so that when we finally come into our final output, then we've got our department, we can do our SLA met percentage being the SLA met over the total number of tickets, which was just doing the number of rows. Sorry, I think the prep didn't show that, but it is here, if you can see it here. I'm not sure why it's not popping up in the aggregated fields here, but it might be a little bit of a bug. But that's how we're getting our SLA met percentage there. And then we're doing our rank on that. So creating our calculator field as a rank. And we can see that we are looking at our SLA met and we're doing a rank on it, but it's going from 1 to 5. There's no 2, 3, 4 as it is in the solution output. So what we're actually doing here is a dense rank instead of just a normal rank, which I hadn't used before. So that's a cool way of doing that too. I do notice that I haven't renamed my rank 1 here, but that's a small detail. It's doing all the right things, and I hope this solution was useful for you. Thanks for watching.